Meanwhile, in front of the gate, Kair charged toward Victor. Despite his battered state, he showed no hesitation in his movements. Inwardly, Kair knew that Victor was far stronger than him, and he knew well that even attempting to stand against such an opponent might cost him his life. But Gislin's order echoed clearly in his mind, for him to tie down Victor until Vanessa was ready. Even in the face of such a formidable opponent, the gleam in Kair's eyes never faded. The reckless abandon in his bearing seemed never to cease. His mind focused on only one thing: to land a single strike on Victor. A sudden flash of memory resurfaced in Kair's mind, recalling the time he had asked Gislin to demonstrate particular moves. Despite Kair's usual antics, Gislin had listened intently to the question. Although awkward and embarrassed about asking for instructions, Kair had inquired about how Gislin managed to dodge a strike during their fight at Moriana's recognition. He was especially curious about one slick move where Gislin had dodged and then quickly cut through the distance between them. Embarrassment showed clearly on Kair's face, but he still managed to express his points and ask Gislin to teach him. Glancing back slightly, Gislin smiled at Kair's growth in character. Before, Kair would have defiantly spoken toward Gislin rather than humbly asking. Turning back away, Gislin explained that the specific movements themselves were not what mattered. He said that the first time someone fights him, they'll probably think he is just a beast who charges straight in. Because of this, they tend to underestimate him. Now on the battlefield, Kair charged at Victor with Gislin's word in mind. His body was bloodied, and his sword was broken, yet his spirit to land a hit never wavered. That determination drove him, an ambition to land a single strike against an opponent he could not defeat. Of course, Victor behaved exactly as Gislin had explained. He swung his sword toward the incoming enemy while muttering about how simple the redhead was, a beast who only knew how to charge straight in. Within moments, Kair reached Victor and launched a flurry of consecutive sword strikes. Unfortunately, Victor had seen every single one of Kair's sword swings, deflecting, blocking, and launching his own counterattack. Right after, as if pulling every bit of strength he could muster, Kair stepped back and spun. Using his hand like a bowstring, Kair hurled his sword. With mana lingering on the throne blade, it tore through the air, aiming for his opponent's neck. Victor simply scoffed, thinking it was only the last desperate attempt of what a wounded beast could muster. With an upward swing of his sword, Victor deflected the sword strike with ease. Yet again, Kair failed to land even a single hit on him. Kair had only accumulated wounds on his body, lost his sword, and now faced total defeat. Victor spoke condescendingly, saying fools always make rash decisions when they think they have nothing to lose, without realizing it will be their last choice in life. It was just how simple it appeared to Victor. He had not yet solidified his own realm to reach the superhuman level, failing to notice his opponent's intent. The moment Victor finished speaking, he spun his blade through his side. In a single motion, he swiftly thrust it forward, intending to deliver his final blow to end the fight with the redhead. Gislin's voice rang out in Kair's mind, reminding him that if he could hide his true intent within his ferocity, and with it he could open a path for opportunity. The blade came straight for his head, but Kair showed not a shred of fear on his face. His eyes remained focused, facing what his opponent thought was the last blow. At the last possible moment, Kair shifted his head just enough, causing the sword strike to completely miss its mark by mere inches. Within that split second, Kair grabbed hold of Victor's hand to control his own movements. Only after the sword had passed did blood spray from Kair's temple, grazed lightly by the blade. Using Victor's own sword stance against him, Kair moved unnaturally fast to seize his broken sword still flying through the air. Being held off by Kair's sudden grip, Victor lost all momentum to pull back his sword, leaving no obstacle to Kair's swift, precise movements. At that instant, Kair brought his broken sword crashing down toward Victor. There was no time for Victor to maneuver his horse to dodge, and he knew it. That was the moment Victor realized Kair could definitely land at least one solid hit. The broken blade tore down toward Victor's chest. Without a chance to imbue mana into it, Kair's broken sword only grazed Victor's silver, pristine armor. Though Kair seemed to have no intention to strike Victor directly, he was aiming for something else, which was Victor's steed. The broken sword landed perfectly on the horse's spine, blood spraying vividly from a strike. Victor had no chance to block the attack, since he trusted his sword completely. He could only watch in disbelief as the erratic movements of the redhead had claimed his horse. Quite literally, Kair had knocked Victor off his high horse as it fell lifelessly to the ground, leaving Victor no choice but to leap off. Meanwhile, Kair tumbled face first onto the earth in a comical, almost pitiful way. His breathing became labored and heavy. His body refused to move any further. After that brief but explosive strike he had launched, Kair's strength had finally given out. Victor thought briefly about that irregular move to catch a sword midair after he had deflected it. Even in a losing battle, Kair had laid the groundwork to turn the tide, a state only those prepared to die could reach. Victor did not immediately finish Kair off. Instead, he praised the redhead, admitting that he wasn't just a brainless beast after all. Kair's body still refused to stand. If Victor had wished, he could have ended Kair's life then and there. Somehow, Victor chose to entertain the wounded beast, Kair the redhead. Victor strode closer, raising his sword as he spoke calmly about how people sometimes surpass their limits on the edge of life and death. Unfortunately, Kair's strike had missed its mark. Throughout the fight, Kair's sword had broken but remained clean of Victor's blood until he stabbed the horse. Meanwhile, Victor's sword was stained crimson with Kair's own blood. Pointing his sword, Victor asked the redhead, slumped on the ground and unable to move, if he had any last words. Kair muttered something under his breath, barely audible to his opponent. A flicker of surprise dawned on Victor's face, even beneath his iron helmet, as Kair clearly noticed that he had just flinched. The defiant smile on Kair's face never faded. He felt exhilarated as he loudly declared that he had finally landed a solid hit. It was true. If only Victor had not been wearing his heavy armor, the broken sword Kair had brought down could have embedded itself deeply into his chest. Just then, a series of throwing knives tore swiftly through the air, aimed straight toward Victor, who stood ready. Fortunately, Victor noticed them immediately as he lifted his head. It wasn't particularly threatening to him. Victor took a quick step back, skillfully dodging all the throwing knives. They landed right in front of Kair. Had they missed, they might have struck Kair's head instead. It was Belinda who appeared, swinging a hooked line as she maneuvered expertly above the two men on the ground. It was a rare sight, a woman clad in a maid uniform in the middle of a brutal war between two estates. Despite her fluttering clothes, her movements displayed the precision and discipline of a trained assassin. With uncanny accuracy, Belinda threw the hook, which landed squarely on Kair's clothes. She scoffed at Victor as she moved gracefully through the air. Given the chance, she would have faced the hidden blade of Desmond County without hesitation, but saving Kair was her immediate priority. Belinda landed firmly on her horse, darting swiftly away from the battle as she pulled Kair toward her. Trained in deadly assassin techniques and possessing mana cultivation skills that Ghislaine deemed perfect, Kair's weight posed no challenge for her, leaving Victor alone on the field. All Victor could think about were Kair's last words. He pondered deeply how significant it was for the redhead to land a hit on him. Kair's last blow had stunned him, and if not for the woman's timely intervention, he might deliver the final blow. Kair was being carried away by Belinda atop the horse. He muttered that his enemy had almost died. Despite his inability to move, Kair still dared to utter such bold words, which prompted Belinda to threaten to put him down again if he didn't behave. On the other hand, realization dawned on Victor's mind. He knew that the single hit the redhead had landed on him wasn't worth trading his life for. On the surface, it wasn't. This was Victor's understanding, but he knew that for the redhead, it was something worth risking his life for. Victor turned his gaze around, trying to understand the overall state of the war beyond the immediate situation. Around him, the castle walls burned fiercely. Perdium's forces were swarmed by the sheer numbers that Dygald possessed. As things stood, nothing seemed certain to Victor. The fall of Perdium appeared inevitable. Turning his gaze toward the gate, he finally saw it. The redhead's valiant effort to land a single hit on him had been merely to buy time. Now, Dygald's forces were packed tightly in front of the gate. Only a squadron of heavy infantry could pass through at a time. Far beyond the line, centered perfectly from Victor's vantage point, a mana concentration gathered in the middle of the opening. He focused intently to discern what it was. A few tied up, passed-out mages circled a woman wearing an unassuming white robe. An old staff was held firmly in both of her hands. It was Vanessa. Her timid demeanor had vanished, replaced by a fierce and determined expression. She had yet to develop any longing for Perdium. The idea of killing thousands was far from her life's purpose. This was her own inner fight, one she was resolved to see through for the sake of her young lord. Victor's spine shuddered as the realization struck him like a crashing wave. A wild redhead had appeared solely to hold him off, buying precious time for whoever was inside the broken gate to prepare a devastating spell. Everything leading up to this moment had been a carefully laid trap for Dygald's forces. A gleam of brilliant light flickered in Vanessa's eyes as the voice of her young lord, Ghislain, echoed in her mind. He had told her that when the gate was breached and the enemy stood at the doorstep, she could turn the tide in an instant with her magic. She recalled the time when they had both overseen the burial of a massive number of runestones in front of the gate. She had asked Ghislain if she could truly bear such responsibility. Ghislain had turned toward her with unwavering confidence and assured her she could definitely accomplish it with her abilities. His trust in her was absolute, a pivotal wedge in the plan that, if it failed, would spell ruin for the entire estate. The same crushing weight of responsibility that Kair bore to hold Victor off. Vanessa's lips moved softly, as if whispering a delicate incantation. With it came a tremendous explosion of mana, precise and exquisitely controlled by a single, once timid mage. She summoned a power far beyond human limits, defying the boundaries of the mage's circle. The immense mana swirled into glowing symbols orbiting Vanessa. In that suspended moment, every person present, ally and enemy alike, froze in place. In their eyes, the same vision unfolded. It began right at Vanessa's feet, the very place where the runestones had been buried. Between the lone mage and the advancing swarm of Dygald's forces, a crimson barrier rose, rippling like water reflecting the dying sun. Then, an overwhelming explosion of flame strike erupted. The unassuming, timid mage had unleashed the devastating spell Ghislain had concocted that only her talent could trigger. The sheer intensity of the flames engulfed every Dygald soldier daring to step within the gate's bounds. The earth trembled beneath the roaring inferno, the eruption of flame relentless and ever-growing. No one in Perdium's forces was harmed, as everything was perfectly aligned and timed for the spell to succeed. The shockwave pulsed outward first, crashing through the gate and spreading into Dygald's troops beyond. The blaze continued unabated. The runestones didn't trigger an instant combustion, but radiated power steadily after activation. The towering pillar of fire consumed siege towers and ladder carts alike, swelling larger with each passing second. As Walter stood silent, Randolph's jaw dropped in awe. Belinda steadied her steed, while Kair summoned every ounce of strength to witness the towering flames. Gillian strode confidently toward the gate, drawing closer to observe the destruction firsthand. Ghislain gazed ahead with quiet contentment, as if awaiting this very day. Vanessa had surpassed all her limits, wielding a massive destructive spell possible only for an eighth circle mage, the cusp of human existence, a true transcendence. Dygald's forces fell into utter chaos. Those at the front could neither retreat nor advance to finish the war, despite the gate having been smashed open. Those further back fled frantically, unable to withstand the agony of being burned alive. The black cavalry unit commanded by Ghislain charged fiercely from the flank, striking straight at the broken formation of Dygald's forces. No one dared to stand and fight. The soldiers scattered, running frantically to retreat. Ghislain swung his sword relentlessly through the chaos, and the remaining Dygald forces offered no resistance. Those who survived the raging flames were swiftly cut down by Ghislain's black cavalry unit. Without pause, Ghislain barked out sharp commands to his mercenaries to encircle Dygald's forces. They were already in full retreat. The tide of the war had decisively shifted. Yet Ghislain showed no mercy, as if no one deserved any. From this moment onward, the only things daring enough to challenge Ghislain, Dygald's soldiers emerging from the engulfing flames, had no moment to catch their breath before being met by the long, relentless line of black cavalry unit charging toward their necks. Every one of them had entered hoping to earn recognition for their service, only to now run desperately for their lives. Victor's breath came in ragged gasps. The oppressive heat was nearly unbearable. Fortunately for him, his bearing as a high-level knight allowed him to shield himself somewhat from the flames. Within moments, he understood that if they fell back immediately, his forces might manage to retreat through the battlefield's edges. Just then, a soldier approached him. With labored breaths and unsteady steps, the man drew near to deliver urgent news. The soldier grimly reported that the situation was dire. Most of the troops had been burned alive. As soon as he finished, the soldier implored Victor to issue the order for a full retreat. Victor muttered under his breath in irritation. It was understandable. Nothing about this war seemed to go in his favor. His 6,000-strong army was being consumed by fire, leaving barely 1,000 able to retreat. On the other hand, though Perdium's forces were exhausted, they remained intact. From Desmond's perspective, this war had been meticulously planned over years of silent preparation. Victor had blocked every path to ensure Perdium's downfall. Yet one after another, unseen variables emerged to thwart his plans. There was Perdium's black cavalry unit, the formidable leader of the Cerberus mercenary Mad Dog. There was even a high-tier mage who had burned thousands with a single devastating spell. Victor let out a defeated sigh, realizing that these factors were perfectly aligned, not mere coincidence, to block his victory. It was as if he had walked blindly into a carefully laid trap. Supporting himself on his sword, Victor resolved on his next course of action. He strode off purposefully, ordering all soldiers to fall back and retreat for the time being. He explained that this area was not near the forest. Once they escaped the flames, they could regroup safely at the base. Victor expressed his deep frustration with the situation. He knew the conquest of Perdium would take far longer than he had planned, but given the current circumstances, it was unavoidable. With that, he ordered his soldiers to contact Adon immediately. Then he finally noticed someone approaching. Turning to see who it was, his eyes widened in disbelief, visible through the narrow slit of his helmet. Someone had come from Dygald's camp at the very rear of the formation, carrying Adon's severed head in hand. The gruesome sight of Adon's helmet, drenched in blood, added a further layer of devastation to Dygald's forces. It was Gillian. He strode steadily toward Victor, his long-handled massive axe slumped over his shoulder, just as bloodied as the helmet that bore the fallen valiant knight's severed head. With steady resolve, Gillian stood firmly before the high-level knight and calmly asked whether he was the commander of Dygald's army. Victor's breath caught in his throat, his gaze fixed unblinkingly on Adon's severed head. The fact that someone capable of slaying a knight as strong and loyal as Adon had appeared weighed heavily on him. Perdium's hidden forces, previously unreported and unknown, were deeply bewildering. Without hesitation, Gillian released Adon's head, letting it drop to the ground with a final thud. Then he raised his massive axe and pointed it directly at Victor, issuing a cold challenge. His army and main camp were utterly destroyed, and he should surrender immediately. Whether this was another trap was unclear to Victor. The undeniable truth was that his forces continued to dwindle by the second. It was equally baffling how a mage could sustain such a massive, raging fire for so long, yet the barrier of flame still burned fiercely without faltering. For Victor, the war was over, at least in his role as commander. He let out a bitter, maniacal laugh, the sound echoing across the battlefield. In the next moment, he unleashed his mana outward, fully shielding himself from the scorching heat of the flames as he prepared to stand his ground on the battlefield as a true warrior. Gillian remained unfazed, standing fearless and unyielding. The presence of a high-level knight before him held no tangible meaning for the old man who was prepared to die. Victor steadied his breathing and took his stance, proclaiming loudly that Gillian should not make him laugh. Through his defiant words, Victor conveyed that the war might not end as expected. He declared with fierce conviction that he would slit the throats of all in Perdium himself and be done with it. With his breathing now steady and controlled, Victor proclaimed that his war was only just beginning. As a commander, it was his sacred duty to lead and command his forces. This was what was demanded of him to gain the experience required of a commanding officer. Now that his army was gone, only one choice remained: to stand alone as a lone knight in this brutal war. He was prepared to give everything he had, either to die at Perdium's hands or to push beyond his limits, manifesting his realm and transcending the boundaries of humanity to become a true transcendence.